Langa Mbonambi, welcome to the Unsuccessful Podcast. And this podcast is so unsuccessful, in fact, folks, that we have literally just recorded a whole episode and I forgot to hit record. So we'll be all killer and no filler now, in the words of my editor. Langa is a friend who I was introduced to a number of years ago through mutual friends, and you and Unati and your 5 children?
5 children, yes.
Do a whole bunch of different things that we are going to hear about. And but thank you for being on the Unsuccessful Podcast twice.
Thank you. Yes, which means, we're unsuccessful, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's encouraging to be on a podcast, where we're talking about being unsuccessful.
Yeah, and it's encouraging to interview. It's encouraging to interview someone who's willing to be on it for no fee and do it again straight after we didn't record it. So there you go, folks. Real life. So Langa, start, if you would, by telling us a little bit about your family and what life looks like in the home. You've got 5 children. You're married. Like, what does life look like? That sounds chaotic.
Yeah, life is real. I've got married 15 years to my wife, Unati. We have 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, aged 12, 10, 8, 6, and then we've got an 8-month-old little girl. We homeschool our children. Our children are, we say, in the most private school we can afford, which is in our home.
Exclusive.
That's right. We live out in kind of just on the outskirts of Joburg in the area called Milder's Drift. So we are in our community, we deemed as somewhat hippie.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
We're like these black hippies.
Right.
Because we homeschool. We live out almost in the bush. And
is it quite a racially mixed community?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Probably in the area that we're in, with probably few black people that aren't the manual laborers.
Right. Okay.
And so it's like historically kind of Afrikaans, sort of like farming-ish area.
Love that.
Yeah.
And there you are doing your
doing
stuff.
Thing, trying to do planting also veggies and doing kind of that.
And so it's an interesting one for me as I reflect on themes of unsuccess and what the world makes of us and the decisions we make in our lives. Like, what was it that led you and Unati to say, look, we want to homeschool our kids? I know you didn't come from that sort of background.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that journey.
So a big part of it is that so my wife and I both went to traditional kind of school. So none of us were homeschooled. I went to boarding school, all boys boarding schools. And so with my journey actually coming out of high school, so all the way from grade 1, actually all the way till finishing school. I was
boarding school from grade 1. What age is that?
I was 5 turning 6 when I got into boarding school.
Wow, okay, you beat me. I was 8 when I went to
boarding
really?
School. Yeah, bro, that's why I'm as screwed up as I am.
Yeah. But that's why my psychotherapist is so rich. I came back from one session and Sarah said, what did you talk about? I said, boarding school. And I was feeling a bit tender. And she goes, I told you boarding school messed you up.
Yeah. So,
but you had quite a good time, didn't you?
Look, mixed feelings about it, to be honest, because it was in the 80s and it was still apartheid. And so I was part of the first crop of black kids to be in white schools.
Sheesh.
Yeah, so
no pressure.
Yeah, so not a lot about racism, but but that's not what this is about. I'm not going to cry.
But that would be amazing, isn't it? If we just took a completely different turn and it's turned into a therapy session. Yeah. And
so actually, like generally, I had like a love-hate relationship with boarding school. And but what I did love about it is, if you kind of towed the line, it was enjoyable.
Right.
So if you did well like sport, if you fit in with the boys, that kind of thing, you had an awesome experience. If you didn't, it sucked. And so for me, it actually worked out. And so that's why I say it felt like a good experience outside of all the racial stuff.
Right.
And so even when I got out, I was like, I definitely want my sons, especially my boys, to be able to go to boarding school and kind of continue the legacy. And the schools that I was part of were kind of these legacy schools where fathers and grandfathers and, and I think also being kind of the first crop of black kids, I was like, I want my sons also to kind of continue the Mbonambi tradition at these schools. And then I think I like the idea of discipline and order and structure and kind of those things. But then after having a conversation with, I guess after I come to Christ and with a gentleman that could afford to take their child to like an expensive boarding school, but chose to take their child to a public school around the corner from where they live. And they said, hey, look, their understanding is that it's their responsibility to raise their child and to, I guess, be the loudest voice.
For the parents to actually be the disciples and the ones following them predominantly.
Yeah, 100%. And so that really challenged me. And then in studying the scriptures, parents train your children. Deuteronomy 6, teach your children as you wake, as you walk along the wayside, as you eat, as you work. And this idea of not only just speaking to your children, but also demonstrating godliness to your children. And it's this idea also just proximity and taking full responsibility for your children's education. And so for us, our philosophy is whether you homeschool your children or you send them to public school, you need to take full responsibility for your children's education. You need to know what they're learning. You need to be involved in what they're being taught. If there's something that the school is not teaching, you need to find a way to teach them that thing. But you can't just send them to expensive, private boarding school and think, or whatever, or school and think that you're paying all this money, therefore give me a good child, give me an awesome child. Like
sort of sticking something in a machine and hoping it pops out at the end, kind of fully formed and coherent. And
that's kind of like the culture I come from in Joburg, where everyone's trying to get their kids into a private school, work and make enough money, because if I send them to a private school, my child's going to be awesome. But they don't spend their time with their child. They don't know what their child is learning. They don't know. They're not aware of the things their child needs to unlearn as well. So kind of things. So that's
big, isn't it? Coming from the template that you had for education, and then going and loving it actually, with caveats aside, but then going kind of full. What's the word? Steer the other direction.
Yeah.
In face of a whole bunch of people around you for whom success looks like climbing that ladder of educational achievement and kudos and generational legacy in a school. And it just strikes me as being a very, like, in the terms of my book, a really unsuccessful, i.e. faithful to what you believe to be true through your faith in Jesus, way of doing life.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And I bet, or I imagine, in fact, I know, because we talked about this for half an hour before this one, that, one of the things around the decisions you make brings comparison issues, or fuels maybe a sense of comparison with others. Like, that's a big theme in the book, and it's something that I definitely struggle with. Like, I'd love to hear some of your journey on that.
Look, the comparison thing has been a real thing, and a monkey that still would kind of jump on our backs. And we've had to just kind of toe the line and just say, listen, this is what we believe, and so regardless of how difficult it is, let's keep going. And so I think part of the biggest challenges, like with homeschool, is comparing your child's development to kids in like mainstream school,
right?
And thinking, shucks, am I screwing my kids up, by not allowing them to play hockey or whatever it is, and all these other things, but just saying, hey, look, there's a particular thing that we're doing here. We value what we're doing. We believe in what we're doing. Let's continue on. And honestly, there's, especially like at the beginning of the year, people are taking pictures of the kids dressed in school uniform and
photos,
photos. Yeah, those kind of things. And you honestly, at moments where we look at those things, we're like, oh, I wish we could do that, or missing out on that kind of thing. Missing out on joining a big school where there's, cheering and, seeing your child become a prefect and, all those kind of things. And honestly, there've been moments where we would kind of mourn not having those things. But we'd have to just say, hey, look, we really believe in what we're doing. We really believe this is the way that we need to raise our children. And the reality is also for us is that we are not some of, I think, a philosophy around our child raising is that we're not actually trying to raise CEOs and Fortune 500 MDs, those kind of, we want to raise people that love Jesus and that can contribute well to society.
Which I think is beautiful.
Whether they are blue collar workers or white collar workers,
right?
Whatever it is, they must flourish and they must, bring God's kingdom, man.
And so then, to put words in your mouth, success is more about the person I'm becoming as opposed to the things I'm achieving.
Yeah.
The congruence of life with what I believe to be true rather than how other people might conceive my existence. That's really interesting. And
that's really well said, bro, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, I've written a book on it, so I'm just nicking lines from various chapters and making it look like original thought. But I appreciate that. There you go. Book review by someone who's not even read it. But then if we just kind of move from the home education of your children to, what you guys do during the day. So you and Unati have started a clothing brand. Unati runs a really successful, what's it called? Family blog? Blog.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And so it's Our Kind of Family, isn't it, on Instagram? And it's won awards and it's got a number of thousands of followers. You're the leader of We Will Worship, which is a South African worship movement led by, shock horror, South Africans. And putting at the forefront, South African languages and styles and all the rest of it, and not selling out to a Western conception of worship, for example. But a lot of that requires numbers and size to kind of keep going. Right? You need eyes on your blog. You need followers on your Instagram. You need people to turn up to We Will Worship stuff.
Yeah.
Like, tell us a little bit about your relationship with numbers and size and an events-based Christianity.
Yeah. So I think in getting into it, so in the early stages, it was definitely all about numbers. So, and because the culture celebrates numbers, so success is numbers. The more people that you have, the more successful that you are, and the more God is blessing you, and the more anointed you are.
Right.
And because I guess how we function is that numbers is evidence of that. Purely numbers. We don't ask about what's happening in people's lives, any transformative questions, anything, but it's just purely numbers. Therefore, it's success. And so to be honest, we got caught up in some of that. Well, let me speak from the We Will Worship side of things. And when the numbers started happening, it was like, we're really successful. And to be honest, it's not like we were going for the numbers, but then once we are there, we wanted to maintain the numbers and get more numbers, because now numbers were doing things. And numbers means influence, numbers means finances, numbers means impact, and sadly numbers comes under the guise of gospel impact, that we're making a major dent for the kingdom of heaven. But I think along the way, and I think because we're just young people that just wanted to worship God as well, and just see people follow Jesus better, love him more, and but we did get into some spaces over a season where we now had platforms where we could get into places where there were numbers, and we invited it to an event where there's like thousands of people, and we got there and we're like, this isn't a place that we should be.
So wait, just you were at an event, you're leading worship in an event, looking out at maybe tens of thousands of people, and in your heart there's a sense collectively as well that we shouldn't be
this
here.
We'd sing, we'd do, and we'd walk off stage, and it was just the sense of like dread of just like, this was not, the Lord didn't want us in this. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was that, and we had a few of those kind of
Right. Had one, you're like, okay, put it down to bad discernment, then you do a couple more.
Yeah, because it was attractive also for
Right.
us to be at a place where you could report back, we had this many thousands at this event, and then it was like, hey, we were also with this artist, this famous person, and
sort of jumping on the back of someone else's
yeah,
numbers as
yeah.
well.
Well, it was a good look.
Yeah.
It's a good look to be with certain people, and then it helps your brand
Right.
as well. So it's all those kind of things, and I think we got to a place where we had enough of those moments to say, man, it just feels like we just need to honor God in whatever it is that we do, even if it means saying no to certain things, even if it means being seen in a negative light in certain ways, and just
or looking less successful.
Yeah, and let's just do that, and then we began to choose, kind of be more discerning as to what we would do and what we wouldn't do. Yeah, and to be honest, we aren't popular because of some of those decisions. We've turned down really kind of major opportunities that others would deem are like groundbreaking or whatnot.
Right.
And not partnering with certain people as well. Yeah, and it's and for me, it's like, we've got to honor God, and whatever that looks like. Yeah, whether it's 5 people or it's 1,000 people, whatever it looks like, we'll try as much as possible. Let God dictate that.
Well, and honestly, that's music to my ears, because I don't think that's necessarily that common. But if I was to push back, I'd say, well, Jesus loved a crowd. He fed a whole, thousands and thousands of people, did a load of tricks, miracles. It was enabled him to preach about the kingdom. The obvious pushback to what you're saying is like, well, what's wrong with crowds? Like maybe God's opened that door for you guys to have a voice and an influence.
Yeah. So I mean, Jesus did all that cool stuff. Jesus did live a bit of a rock star life. But he had the crowds, and then, like Luke 14, it says that he turned to the crowd and he said, if you are not willing to hate mother, father, brother, sister, or even your child, or take up your cross, deny yourself and follow me, you can't be my disciple. So he draws the crowd, but he gives them the cost of following him. And that's when the crowd kind of disperses, and then a few people get left behind. He's like, okay, you're my people. Let's do this thing. And we're here today talking about Jesus because of just that handful of people.
The faithful few.
And so that's our charge and our responsibility is, man, to be clear on the cost of following Jesus, and not just gathering people for just gathering's sake. And I think that's where, Jesus didn't say go gather crowds. He said go make disciples. And so if we're just gathering crowds and we're not making disciples, then we're missing the mark.
So the cost of following Jesus. Tell us a bit about the cost of following Jesus as far as you've experienced or as far as you understand it. Because it's not just about turning down, a duet with Chris Tomlin or whatever, presumably. I'm making that up, by the way. I'm just thinking of the pinnacle of like white American Christianity.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the cost of following Jesus is ultimately everything. It's just making Jesus Lord, and I think that's a major part of our gospel presentation that's missing.
Right.
And that's actually what I was thinking about. Romans 12:9. It says if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. And for the heart one believes and is justified, with the mouth one confesses and is saved. And so often I think we speak about the whole Jesus forgiving your sins part.
Yep.
And Jesus imputing his righteousness on you, that part. But we forget about the lordship part.
Okay.
That Jesus is Lord. And that's, the proclamation of the gospel is that. The good news that Jesus is Lord, Lord of all. Which means everything. Right? Which means nothing is off limits. you need to be willing to submit and surrender everything to follow Jesus.
So then what are the connotations for the world of Christian events to say that Jesus is Lord?
Well, if
I'm just poking the bear here.
You know the thing, Pete, like, because I've really wrestled with this.
Yeah. Well,
and we talk about events. I just came from an event where we had 6,000 young people. And 6,000 young people, and I actually made a call to follow Jesus. And I think we had about 10 people. Right. And I think it's probably been one of the most clear calls to follow Jesus I've ever done in my life. Where I literally just quoted what Luke writes, is that if you're not willing to lay down, hate mother, father, if you're not willing to deny yourself, take up your cross, if you're not willing to, forsake and leave everything, you cannot follow Jesus. Just that. No, hey, Jesus will make your life better. Jesus will. And I was grateful that, I think it was about 10 people that responded to that.
Amazing.
And for me, I walked away with such a confidence. It's just like, look, I just spoke the scriptures. I didn't embed. I didn't add anything. I didn't, And I've known in the past there's always that desire to just say something attractional, say something.
Yeah.
But I guess I've journeyed long enough with Jesus to know that I would be lying to people, because following Jesus is brutal. It's hard, man.
It is. It's subversive. It really is. It's no easier now than it was 2,000 years ago in totally different ways.
So I've just decided that I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Anyway, I don't have the power to save. But I'll just speak the scriptures and call people, because then at least I think I walk away with a clear conscience to say, do you know what? Just as Jesus presents the cost of following him, I've also just presented.
Yeah.
And whoever comes. At least they know. We never fully understand what it looks like, but at least the Spirit has moved in your heart, and you've kind of heard what it.
Oh, well, that's the key, isn't it? The Spirit of God moving, and I think one can curate all sorts of different events, whether there's thousands of people or handfuls of people, and if the Spirit is conspicuous in his absence, it's all a clanging cymbal. But I'd love to chat a little bit about what church looks like for you then, because it sounds like you are well acquainted with crowds and standing in front of crowds presenting the gospel. Is that something you do on Sundays as church as well, or what does church look like for you guys?
So we came out of kind of a mainstream church, and we ended up planting a house church. And it was over a series of events where kind of, I think, convictions and philosophy around church changed. And
tell us a bit about that change. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so I originally come from a culture where it was about the gifted. Those that were most gifted were the ones that got to minister. And so even like in a traditional church gathering, only a few gifts get to function and get to be seen. And naturally, because those are the only gifts that get to function, and those are the only gifts that get seen, those are the gifts that get celebrated. And then therefore those people that express those gifts are the ones that get.
I'm imagining you're not talking about the gift of administration here.
Oh no, it's
the one that no one wants.
Yeah,
damn it, Lord, why?
So it's like these gifts of being able to speak, the gifts of being able to communicate, the gift of confidence, even if it is a gift.
Yeah.
But they're very much like kind of natural.
Yeah.
Natural.
The very things you exude. Look at you, just rocking up, just grabbing the mic, just talking about Jesus with confidence.
So that, and naturally also people would express, but only a few gifts. But when you study scripture, it speaks, when you gather, one has a hymn, one has a song, one has an exhortation. It's this idea that we all function together. We all have gifts as, they're gifts of the Spirit. The Spirit of God decides, but it's all for the building up of the body, which means, we all need each other, and we all need all these gifts for the sake of the body and for mutual benefit and edification. and so I really then just struggled with, I guess, the traditional model, because only few gifts got to be expressed.
But you thrived in that, didn't you?
Oh yeah, because I had the right gifts.
Okay.
Right.
And what were they? Well, you just said actually, yeah, like speaking and confidence and all of that.
So even here's the thing with that, is that I realize even in myself, when I was now discipling or raising leaders, I would elevate those people that had those gifts.
Right.
But then when you actually look in, I guess in church leadership, kind of the highest leadership is eldership, right? And it's simply because those people are people that are exemplary in following Jesus, and so those
exemplary in character.
Yes, because all those characteristics, have got to do with character, and it's got to do with how people live their lives, and even when you look at all those things, those aren't things that you can. I can't just, for example, meet you today, Pete, and then next day ordain you as an elder.
Even if I present the gospel to you in 5 clear steps and make you cry.
Yes, because they've all got to do with things that can only be seen over time.
Okay, such as what? Like, give me some examples.
So, like patience, someone who's not taken to anger. I can only see that after spending some time with you, after also seeing you in high pressure situations.
So better than a sort of preaching school or a seminary would be for you to follow me around with a stick and just kind of prod me for a week and just get me really pissed off and impatient, and then you can be like, okay, this is the character we see or don't see in you.
Yeah, I mean,
that'd be an interesting.
Most our church leaders, Pete, you just need to study Bible and you need to speak well, and then you can plant a church.
Golly.
You can lead a church. Nothing to do with, hey...
well, that's not awful, is it?
What?
Speak well, you can... do you know what I mean? Like, there are worse things that we could look for.
Do you know why it could be awful? It's because we're called to reproduce after ourselves. We're called to make disciples.
Okay.
And so if we're just reproducing intellects and great speakers, then we've got a problem. We're supposed to reproduce Christ. And so those are the people that should be in leadership. Those are the people that should be seen. Those are the people that should be caring for people, or those people that are demonstrating the character of Christ. Because that is what we want replicated.
So then, as we kind of draw to a close this conversation, what I want to kind of end with is a question to you, Langa. Like, when you look around South Africa, it's the most beautiful and vibrant and amazing country, and yet division continues to prevail in many ways. I'm thinking racially, I'm thinking socioeconomically and culturally. And yet, the majority of the population here would say they follow Jesus. What would you love to see? What's your vision for the church speaking into that kind of cultural or nominal Christianity, that kind of events-based faith? What's your vision of hope for the church in South Africa?
I think my vision is for the church, just any kind of follower of Jesus, is, I can't remember who said it, but someone once said that, the symbol for Christianity is often the cross, but it should actually be the empty tomb.
Good one.
Right?
No, claim that as your own. That's original Langa quote there.
So it should be a picture of an empty tomb or symbol of the empty tomb, because it was all about the resurrection. Because of the resurrection, it proved that Jesus is Lord, that, Jesus sinless. And because of that, he can be our savior. He can be our Lord, and so in looking at my life and just looking at Christians, is that I'm just not convinced we believe in the resurrection. Paul speaks about life and hardship and things like it. He says, but if there is no resurrection, then we are those that are to be pitied the most.
Sure.
Because of all that we have to endure as followers of Jesus.
Right, it's kind of worst of both worlds.
Yeah, it's exactly that. You might as
all
well.
the Christian duty, none of the joy, none of the hope.
Yeah. Exactly that. And so our lives should be fueled with that hope of resurrection, that actually there's so much more.
Right.
And what we do in this life right now, we're sowing into what's to come. And the cool thing about following Jesus is that you actually enjoy it. There is hope now.
Yeah.
There's life right now. but you still get to sow and invest in what's still to come. And so for me, it's just like, if people actually really believed in the resurrection, they'd organize their lives in such a way that reflects that. And so like what we did, we just did a study on what God values or what God rewards in Scripture, because we're trying to think, okay, how should we build our lives? What should we value? Because we want to align our values to God's values. And it was like, okay, looking at what God rewards, and because at the end of the day, we want to win. We want if there's a resurrection, we also want to be rewarded. We want, if we're going to go through stuff, we want to be rewarded. And so you look at things like constantly that you hear phrases of those that endure, like endure to the end. Things like crazy things like it's more blessed to give than to receive. Then if you give to the poor, you lend to God. But just like all these crazy kingdom things that we
that are completely countercultural,
that are completely countercultural, laying your life down, rejoicing in suffering.
Yeah. It's a biggie.
Yeah,
still learning that one.
Yeah, like seeing the glory and getting to identify with Christ, and seeing that as actually that's success, and actually then just building your life around these things. And when they happen, when suffering comes, you're like,
I think that's amazing. So true kingdom success, or what we could say, how to be unsuccessful in the eyes of the world, is ordering. How would you say it is?
Building your life around what God values or around what God rewards.
And that is true success.
And that is true. That is true success, because He's the one that determines, right?
Right.
What success is, and unfortunately, as you say, those things are always countercultural.
Countercultural indeed. Well, I think that's an appropriate mic drop moment. Order your life around those things that God rewards. And if you don't know what they are, find them in Scripture.
Yeah.
And
probably one of those most quoted, good and faithful servant.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Faithfulness.
Right. Rather than those who just did the miracles and the prophesying is away from me, I never knew you. Actually, the faithfulness to God.
Faithfulness.
That's big. Well, Langa, thanks so much for being with us today on the Unsuccessful Podcast. I've got to get you to the airport. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble with Unati.
Yes.
And hopefully I press record this time, because we haven't got time to do it all again. Bless you, mate. Thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me, man.